Over the past few days, Fox Connecticut and The Current have been exploring Connecticut's history with the death penalty and encouraging public discussions and debate on whether the ultimate punishment should continue to be used in Connecticut. Former Governor John Rowland spoke with Fox Connecticut's Logan Burns.
So let's talk a little bit about this. We want to put up a screen that has which states have the death penalty and which do not. And you can see from the map here that interesting to note that our neighbors to the north and the south currently do not have the death penalty. Those states include Massachusetts and Rhode Island, New York, New Jersey, also the District of Columbia. You see the red states have the death penalty. The blue states do not. Why don't you just give us your impression of the death penalty? Are you for it or against it, and why?
Well, I'm definitely for the death penalty. And I think the blue and red is very appropriate because, we are a blue state, and the other states that do not have the death penalty are blue states. So it's a very politically charged issue. But the real question is whether we have a workable death penalty here in Connecticut. And that's the charade that's been played for the last 30 or 40 years. We have it on the books, but between the appeals process and what you're going to see the jury go through next week on the mitigating circumstances, I should say this week, so we make it so cumbersome that the politicians get to be in favor of the death penalty, knowing full well it'll never be implemented, for example, with the 10 animals that are on the death penalty roll right now. And then they get into the whole argument of, well, what if an innocent person is killed? Mm-hmm. And I did some research, and I can tell you for the last 100 years, there's no evidence that an innocent person has ever been executed. But I think what we'll talk about, and I think what the argument will be through the next week is, if the death penalty is on the books, if they've been convicted of these 6 capital felonies, why aren't we just going through with the process? And, Michael Ross is a great example. Here's a guy who stalked, raped, and killed 8 women. And I wouldn't even say women, I would say girls between the ages of 14 and 26. And he wanted to die. And with our problematic death penalty, it still took 18 years for him to die, and he wanted to die. So if we're going to have the death penalty, let's have a workable one. The one we have now is not workable.
And Stephen Hayes, who was recently convicted, the first defendant in the Cheshire home invasion, has since said that he wants to die, but his attorney has said that he is going to try to fight for his life. So you have situations sometimes where these people are convicted of these heinous crimes, they want the death penalty, and then they're not given the death penalty readily.
Stephen Hayes will never die. And here's the problem. If he wants to die and he wants the law as it's been created, as it's been passed, if he wants the ultimate conviction, and that's the death penalty, why aren't we letting that happen? And the fact that an attorney can step in, and that's really part of the problem with the process. An attorney can step in and say, no, I know better than the defendant. Oh, there's a problem with the process.
One of the main arguments against the death penalty is that we consider ourselves a civilized society, and to be civil, we really shouldn't be taking the life of another person. What do you say to people who say this is just not the right thing to do? Most of Europe doesn't have the death penalty. Some of the countries that do have the death penalty are countries that we really don't particularly care for, like Yemen, like Iraq, places like that, Saudi Arabia.
Well, I would say this. Number one, the government kills people on a daily basis. It's called war. And so when you have the moral argument that, government cannot take another life, we're doing it in Iraq and Afghanistan, even as we speak, to stop evil from coming to our borders. So if that's the government position, why isn't it appropriate when someone knowingly kills someone? And don't forget, there's hundreds and hundreds of murders that take place in Connecticut. These are a very small portion of people whose crimes are so horrific, with the aggravating factors and sexual assault and all the other multiple slayings and so forth, all built into these convictions. If we don't believe that that is the true cruel and unusual punishment of having these people sitting on death row and not getting the ultimate conviction, so I think that most people, 67% in Connecticut, believe the death penalty should be on the books, it should be implemented. Ironically, people will say, in this case, the Pettit case, we really believe in the death penalty. Well, that's how it's supposed to work.
Sure. To your argument that war is the government killing people, I mean, somebody might argue that the wars are designed to protect our borders, and in this situation, the death penalty is really almost about revenge. Deterrence, I know, retribution is something along those lines.
It's about justice and finality.
Yeah.
And when you watch, for example, the victims' families from the Michael Ross case, for 18 years, years they had to go through these appeals and this whole process. It's about justice and finality. I don't believe in deterrent argument.
Okay.
I don't believe in the revenge argument. In a just society, when these animals, and they are animals in the Pettit case, when these animals strike out knowingly against human beings, our friends, our neighbors, our fellow citizens, they should pay the ultimate sacrifice. It's very clear and very simple.
I've heard some from victims' families that sentencing the person to death or actually killing that person who has killed one of their loved ones or friends doesn't really provide any closure. You just can't bring the person back, and whether they're sitting there in jail until they die or whether they get put to death just doesn't really provide any kind of closure.
Well, we're a society of laws, and in our society here in the state of Connecticut, as in other states, they have the death penalty as the final, I believe, justice. I know a lot of families are going to be split one way or the other. I know the public is split one way or the other. But what I think is really telling is that when you see these crimes in the Pettit case, they're just so horrific and so off the charts. People are saying, yes, now I'm in favor of it. Well, that's the way the law was set up years and years ago. But I've got to emphasize it has to be a workable law. This is a facade. This is a charade. Then the politicians are the ones that are really trying to escape all this. Matter of fact, they're trying to repeal it even as we speak. And they also had an early release program for arsonists and kidnappers and murderers. And so this legislature, this blue state legislature, the Democrats in particular, have been trying to water down these laws for a number of years.
Okay.
But the point is, in a just society, we need to take action. We have to have laws to protect our fellow citizens.
You can see more of our interviews on the death penalty on our website at ctnow.com. Don't forget, if you missed something here on The Real Story, you can now watch it online by going to ctnow.com. You can also catch us on YouTube. Thanks for watching this week's edition of The Real Story. We'll see you here again next week.